Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Trapping Today podcast. I'm your host Jeremiah Wood, and the Trapping Today podcast is brought to you by Kaatz Brothers Lures, Kaatzbros, Kyle and Kellen Kaatz. Great trap and supply company out of Savannah, Illinois. Go check them out. Go to their website, kaatzbros.com, and really helpful guys. Really awesome to deal with, and they got lots of stuff there. They got books, DVDs to help get you started and learn about whatever species you are planning to trap. All kinds of useful information. So great to have them on, and thanks Kaatz Bros for supporting the podcast. And I'm happy to have you guys here. I'm really excited about tonight's episode. We've had a lot of questions from people about fur and fur grading, and how we all make sense of the different grades of fur and the terminology around all of that. Because a lot of us send our fur out to auction, to the major auction companies, either NAFA or FHA, and you get back this slip which shows all of the, or if you're like me and you may look at it online, and you pull up your account and you see how all your animals graded. And all those pelts have all these different symbols around them, specifying the size and color and the primeness of the fur and everything. And lots of potentially confusing things. So I struggle making sense of it a lot of times, and a lot of you do as well. And I've seen and heard that with a lot of the feedback that you have sent me and asked more about clarification there. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to get somebody who is really in this game in a big way and right in the middle of things. So in this episode we have an interview with Mark Taylor from Fur Harvesters Auction Inc. in North Bay, Ontario, and he graciously agreed to have a chat with me about fur grading and a little bit of basics on FHA. And we went through a lot of these details about how fur is graded and what all those abbreviations mean, and I think we cleared up a lot of things. I know I learned a whole heck of a lot about fur grading, and I was really excited about it and excited to share it with you guys. I think you'll learn a lot too, and as always, it's great to have you here. You can contact me with any further questions about trapping or the podcast or anything else in general. jrodwood@gmail.com, jrodwood@gmail.com. Thanks again, and enjoy the episode. So Mark Taylor, you are with Fur Harvesters Auction in North Bay, Ontario, Canada.
Yes.
And what's your position?
I look after trapper relations, public education, stuff like that. I'm also a fur grader, so I grade coyotes, lynx, fishers, raccoons.
Awesome. So we got in touch with the right guy. A lot of people from that listen to the podcast send me emails with questions about fur grading, and there's definitely a lot of confusion around different grades of fur, how it's graded, and what all those different symbols mean. So I'd love to get into that. But first, I want to know a little bit more about you. We've never met before, but I feel like I know you because I saw you on Fur Harvesters NWT with Andrew Stanley there doing a couple of episodes. But tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I've been trapping since, I guess, the age of 4 with my grandfather. I started that, so that was 40 years ago. So I've always been involved with trapping. From there, I went to Fish and Wildlife College here in Ontario and graduated as a Fish and Wildlife Tech. And after that, I got hired on at the Fur Harvesters here in North Bay and started at the bottom, but I've worked my way up to learn how to grade and everything else. So.
Nice. When did you start with Fur Harvesters?
Originally, I started in about 1993, and I took some time off in the early 2000s, moved away for a little bit, but then just came back about 6 years ago, and resumed where I left off. So.
Right on.
That's what I've been doing. And as far as trapping background, I run a registered trap line here in Ontario, and I actually been working on 2 of them. But with an overall, catch beavers, muskrats, pretty much anything that's available. So.
Nice. Yeah, I think I saw a picture on your Instagram. You're working on building a new trapping cabin?
Yeah, yeah. So I just got permission. We have to wait for, obviously, permission from the local government here to get to build a camp. But yeah, I built a new camp on my new line there, so that's pretty exciting, and hopefully get to spend a lot more time out in the bush next fall.
How far away is that from where you live?
It's about an hour door to door, so it's not too bad.
Nice, good deal. And so is Ontario? It's split up into registered trap lines, very similar to other parts of Canada.
Yeah, there's two different sections. Most of the northern part, the Crown or government land, is set up into these registered lines, and then down in the southern part of the province, it's private land only. So depending on where you get permissions from, similar to most of the other places.
Okay.
You have to get written permission, landowner permission to trap there. But
so if you didn't have a trap line, you could still do a little bit of trap in there.
You could, yeah, as long as you get the landowner permission, right? So.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of background on fur harvesters, because I think a lot of people hear about FHA and they hear about NAFA and don't really know the difference. So is there a difference, and what is that?
Yeah, the difference. So fur harvesters, I mean, where we're at here in North Bay, there's been an auction company since 1947, and we're just the continuation of the original company that started. It was originally just for trappers in Ontario, and since then, back in 1991, we started fur harvesters here from the remnants of that old company that went bankrupt, I guess. And but anyway, we're run by trappers, so we have a board of directors that's all trappers or fur harvesters in some sort. Most of the staff that work here are trappers or have had a trapping license. So that's pretty much the biggest difference between us and NAFA is,
okay.
We kind of understand what's going on with you guys because we are trappers ourselves. And to me, that's pretty important. So
yeah, absolutely.
But other than that, we're basically, set up in the same kind of format as NAFA. But we deal strictly, majority is wild fur. We do a little bit of fox ranch fur, but that's a very small portion of our business.
Okay, yeah, because I remember seeing on one of those videos, it looked like a little bit of ranch fur, and I always thought FHA was wild fur only, but I hesitated to say that because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and some of these fox, quite a few of them are actually trappers as well. So that's one of the reasons we got into the fox part of it was because they wanted us. They're already selling their wild fur through us, and they wanted us to see if we could sell their ranch fur.
Yep.
They weren't happy with where they were dealing with before, so that's why we've taken on that role for them. Just to help them out as well, because like I said, a lot of them trap. There's once the chores are done on the farm, in the fall, then they had time to go trapping as well. So
right, yeah.
That's we just try and look after everybody as best we can. So
that's pretty neat. How many people you have working there?
In the busy season, which is from December to June, we have about roughly 30 staff members.
Wow.
And in the off season, we're down to about 12. Yeah.
No kidding. And so you're handling the vast majority of the fur that you're handling is wild fur, and it's coming from. I'm assuming you maybe get more northern fur than NAFA gets, but you get fur from everywhere, right?
Yeah. So our shipper base is all right across North America. So from Alaska to as far south as Florida. Wherever there's a fur harvesting season, we collect furs from. The majority of the fur does come from the north, but our business is probably half and half Canadian and American goods.
Okay.
So we do collect quite a bit from the States.
Yep.
As well.
So the fur comes in, and can you give us a quick little run through of what happens to the fur from the time you get it to the time it's sold?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So starting off, obviously, most of your followers will know that the stuff gets shipped by an agent from wherever they are to us with all their information on a card, the trapping license number and all that stuff. Once we get the fur in our building, the bags are opened and all the furs are recounted for quantity, just because we are human and we do make mistakes. So we want to verify the counts. If there is an issue with the count, we have somebody else recount it, so we have a double check system, and then we make the changes accordingly. From there, that information is entered into a computer system under each trapper and their account number, and then a barcode tag is assigned with that account number attached to it to each skin that the trapper is sent in. So then we can track those skins throughout the whole process, throughout the whole timeline as to where they came from and who they belong to. And that helps us at the end of the process to be able to tell what the trapper deserves or what they sold their actual skins for.
Sure.
So once that's done, the furs go to a respective area in the building. If they're long-haired furs, such as foxes, lynx, coyotes, marten, fisher, they go through a drumming process, which is just a cleaning process. It's a big round drum, as it's self-explanatory, and it's tumbled with sawdust, water, and laundry detergent, and that just cleans the fur and makes it easier for the grader to determine the grade. Makes the skins look a lot nicer.
Okay, so they're tumbled before you grade them, then?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Because what it does is it takes any grease or blood or dirt or anything out of the fur, makes it look, really nice. If it's matted down, then the grader can't tell how heavy it is and whatnot, or how much the guard hair coverage is there if it looks poor. So we do that to make sure that we get the best grade possible.
Yep.
So from there, then they go to the grading stations. They're sized, so put into respective size categories, graded for size, color, quality, things like that. So once that's all done, then we bundle them up in what we call a lot, LOT, and that's just a group of the same grade skins, and depending on the species or the size will determine how many go in that particular bundle. But then they're grouped that way. Once that's done, that information is entered into a catalog. So if you had 50 beavers of a certain grade, that information goes into a catalog. The lot is assigned a number, and then all those skins that are in that particular bundle are scanned. All the barcodes are scanned, and that way we know that, say, myself had 3 skins in that particular bundle, and that information is put onto you. It goes right to your account, so that when we sell that particular lot, we know it sold for, say, $10. That means that the computer automatically generates the fact that I had 3 skins in there, so it would assign me $30. Okay,
Yep.
And that's how we keep track of who has what, and so they get paid the proper amount for the fur that they brought in.
Yeah, and I think some people maybe are confused about the lotting process. Can you explain how lotting is the reason you lot is to help get the most value for those furs? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so to lot it is obviously that's the next step after grading. So we want to make sure that what the trapper sent in, they get paid for. So when we lot it, that way we can keep track of those skins. So the lotting is basically just, again, scanning those skins into that particular grade so that the trapper gets what they deserve. And that's the important part, to make sure of that, because we know the skins are all of different quality, and we want to make sure that, if you do a really nice job handling your fur, you have nice fur, you get paid top dollar for it, in that sense. So,
yeah, and
that's how we keep track of it. We don't want to mix up anybody's fur, right? So.
Right. I think the one thing that we often forget about is, you think, well, I just sent 20 marten to fur harvesters, and I get a check back. Those 20 marten from me are not getting grouped up, together and being sold as one, because there are buyers that are looking for all different sizes and colors and grades. So the reason you sort them out.
Yeah, and that's the purpose, not just so that the trapper gets what he deserves, but so that they're of like qualities, because different qualities are used for different processes or different types of garments. And the buyers don't want a bunch of different skins. They want all skins of the same size, the same color, and the same grade as far as quality and heaviness and fullness. So that's the basic reason for the grading.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty that's the service that I see the auction houses and the really large fur buyers provide for us as trappers is combining our furs with all these different furs from other places to get a uniform group that a buyer's going to want.
And you end up getting a better price for your stuff that way. If you just have a group of stuff and the buyer, if you have a country buyer and he looks at it and he goes, oh, there's some good ones, there's some bad ones, there's some mediocre, I'll give you X amount. And he probably won't give you what it's completely worth. But if you had, and you're taking his word for it too, right? So
right.
their word for it. So, but when you send it through an auction company like ours, we grade it out, and it's sorted properly as to that's good stuff, and so you get the maximum amount. If unfortunately you have poor fur, then you get you get less money, but it works, I think, completely to the benefit of the trapper to have them all graded properly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, here's where we get into a little bit of the confusing part. I'm pulling up one of my, I just logged into my Fur Harvester's account, and
Okay.
I've got a description from March sale 2018. And so I've got just a few marten, fisher, and weasel here. And here's where a lot of confusion has come from guys that are saying, so the first marten I have is it's a bunch of abbreviations. So LG, SD, PL, XPL. I got one LG Select and number 1 PL, and it's a whole variety. And I think almost every one is a different grade. So that's where
Right.
that's where really I'd love to hear more from you on how you go through the process and how all those are assigned and what they mean.
Okay, no problem. So starting off with that, let's do this. So you have LG, so that's going to be your size. Okay, so that stands for large. If you had 1X or 2X, 3X, that's just, so 1X would be extra large, 2X double, 3X triple. Okay,
Yep.
so that's the large. So again, that's the first step in the grading process is the size.
Okay, so are we looking like with the abbreviations? Is that all in order of how it's graded?
Yes.
Okay, so it's like
Pretty much.
size and weight of the fur and then color.
Yeah, some graders do it a little differently, but that's the general rule is you size them, then you do grade them for. The next step would actually be grade them for damages. That's what you're looking. Some of these things happen all at once, though. You know what I mean? I can look for damages and then the weight, or if
all
it's
at the
a
same
select
time,
or number 1, all at the same time, and then put into its. We have bins or racks or whatever of all the same grade. Then they go into there. From there, once they're sorted, it's kind of broke down. They're sorted that way. So for heaviness and damages, and then they're colored after. So. But anyway, so you're right. It's basically the steps. So the first description is large or extra large, medium, small, whatever. That's the size. That's what you're looking at. In the case of marten select plus number 1, I think that's what you said.
Yeah, that's one of them I'm looking at.
Yeah. So select and ones. So select, obviously, or SEL. That stands for select. So that's the top grade. Okay, so that skin there has really good guard hair coverage, so the longer hair on the outside completely covers the underfur, so you can't see that underfur underneath. Number 1s is then just maybe a little weaker, not quite as much. So what happens when you see two of those descriptions together is that we haven't split them. There's maybe not enough skins to separate the selects from the ones, and we join them together.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
So that gets into a marketing aspect. It's the buyers want large quantities. They're making coats, and they're not just making one. They're making 100 or 1,000 coats at a time. So when you group them together like that, it allows you to have a bigger quantity in that particular grade.
So that's a judgment call that
we're
you
not
make
gonna,
during the process.
Yeah, and we're not going to put the selects in with the
damaged
good slice or something like that, right? So there is a limit to what we can throw together, but so when you see two descriptions like that, anyway, that's what it is.
So that fur could be either or.
It could be either or, yeah, select or number 1. Okay. Either way, it's in a good grade.
Now, does that mean that you've already graded it as one of those, and then they were put together, or when you were grading, did you just had one bin to go in for the selects and the ones?
Yeah, and again, that depends on what we figure we're going to have for quantities. We generally know how many we have ahead of time, and certain grades you get more of than others, so we automatically, like you said, group them together. Sometimes we will, though, separate them first and then throw them together.
Okay. Just depends on what's going on.
Yeah, because if we grade them out and we say, oh, geez, we don't have enough of these to make anything, we'll just put them with another group and join them. So after that, what was after your number one? I believe it
And
was
then
pale.
we have PL. I assume that's a color.
Yeah, that's the color. So that's sort of a shade. In Martin, it's the color. It's pale. And I'm just gonna, yeah. So
So there must be special categories for Martin colors because they vary so much.
yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I don't
so we
see
have
it. I'm looking
pale.
at fur grading terminology from one of your documents here, and I don't see the Martin colors on it.
No, I don't think we have that, to be honest. Probably should, but anyway. So yeah, generally you would start with extra pale, then we go to light brown, and dark.
Okay.
Okay. And depending on the species too, we call them different things or different colors.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
different terminology for that, so that those colors aren't necessarily assigned to say like muskrats or mink or something like that.
Sure.
It
And that depends on what buyers are looking for, right?
the color.
Yeah, in terms of like for Martin, they tend to want darker colors or brown, more
Right.
brown than a pale, right?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe other species, there's not as much variation there.
Right. Yeah, there could be. Beavers, we only have 3 different colors.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter so much. And they don't. And again, they don't vary quite as much. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Yeah, that and so for I know this is going to be a hard question to answer, but generally, can you say whether size, fullness of the fur, or color, which one of those is the most important in determining the value of a pelt?
Yeah, color and heaviness would be obviously size for one thing. I guess that's it's kind of it's a difficult question. I'm gonna try and explain it, but
Yeah.
If you had size is one thing, but so if I had a large, heavy skin, say, and say it was pale, and those are all the top price criteria, right? So it's a large, heavies, they pay the most for heavies, and they pay the most for pales, whatever the species might be. So that's you're going to get the most of. But then if you were to look at an extra large, so the next size up, so it's bigger, but a semi-heavy, which is not quite as heavy, pale again. All right. So now it's worth more because it's an extra large. It's still worth a lot because it's pale, but it's only semi-heavy, so it's not quite as heavy or valuable as far as weight.
Mm-hmm.
But with those other 2 criteria being the top, then it now makes it worth more than the large, heavy pale. Do you understand?
Okay. Yep.
So you can have a smaller skin, and then in that saying that too, it could go the other way. You could have a large, and it all depends on what the demand is. But you could also have a large, heavy pale that's worth more than an extra large skin.
Yeah.
But basically, it's kind of set up that way.
So
I would say size, obviously, square inches is the biggest factor, and then after that it would be weight, and then color. Color is not quite as important these days to dye most of those skins.
Okay.
A certain color, or they put what they call an uptone into it, a brightener. It makes it a little clearer, kind of I don't know, just a different color. But most of the skins today have some sort of thing done to them.
So the Martin that we get from the lower 48, they tend to be very either pale or kind of like an orangish color.
Yeah.
Do you know if are those getting dyed or they're just getting used for something different?
I would say they're probably being dyed, either brown or black even.
Okay.
That orangey color that's not really the orangey ones are the paler ones. If there's not a lot of orange in them, they'll do that uptone, and it kind of I can't describe it over the phone. You'd have to actually see it, but it makes them look a lot nicer, and they can use them kind of more natural. But the other ones are definitely, if they have that I know my marten in Ontario are similar to that too. We get lots of orange ones.
Okay.
And that's not a very desirable color, so
yeah.
they would dye them, again, black or whatever.
So we're getting a lower price for that because it's going to cost them more to go through that dyeing process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime they have to do something to that skin to get to what they want, then they're going to lower the price because it's a cost to them.
So you talk about the heaviness of the fur. Basically, for there's a lot of different terms, but I guess one word I'd use is like how prime the fur is.
Yeah.
How do you judge that? Do you have any tips on like things that you do to tell, or is it just kind of a thing that you just look at it and by looking at it?
Yeah, it's actually a feel. So it's just the way we rub the skins. So if we want to keep talking about marten, you grab the skin by the head, and then you would rub your fingers through it backwards, basically from the tail up towards the head, and just kind of feel. We call it cushion, or the amount of underfur that's there, and it's something that has to be learned through trial and error and a lot of practice and going through thousands and thousands of skins before you determine whether you have a heavy or a semi-heavy, and that's the learning how to grade, I guess.
That's
so it's not something that most trappers can get good at. They might be able to tell it's a heavy skin versus something that's pretty weak, but it's the in-between stuff where the graders come into play, and that's their judgment call, and that's just their practice and their experience, being able to tell. And that's all grading is does this skin belong in this grade or does it belong in that grade?
Yeah.
Making that decision and sticking to it. We call it a line. So we have that line between the grades, and we have to decide which one goes where. And that only comes with experience. You can't really, look at something or pick that up quickly. It's just a matter of time.
So I'm guessing you spent a lot of time alongside an experienced grader, and just you guys kind of graded a bunch of furs together and made sure you were doing it the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So when I started, like you said, stand next to an experienced grader, and then he or she would let me go through a bunch of skins, and I would separate them into piles, and then they would go back through them, and then they would grade them themselves, and they'd tell me, no, this one should go here, and this one should go there. And just so I got the idea of, okay, now I can see why that one went there, and that kind of just establishes that line that I was talking about. So that's what you're learning. So that was just constantly doing that over and over again until I got, able to do it on my own consistently. And being consistent is the key, because the buyers don't want the wrong skins, and they're buying heavy skins. They don't want any of those semi skins in there, right? That's not what they're purchasing. So
right. Yeah.
That's to do that. So, and we operate on a pretty tight tolerance as far as misthrown skins. I mean, we are human, so the mistakes are made, but we basically operate on a 3% error margin on our grading. So 3 out of 100 skins can be in the wrong grade without it, the buyers complaining too much.
Yeah.
So it's not a lot. It's pretty tough.
Yeah. So you're looking at you're running your finger along, and you're telling the underfur, how thick the underfur is. Now, at the same time, you're looking at the guard hair as well to tell if that is covering the underfur?
Yeah, it depends on the species too.
Okay, because like coyotes, you really want to have the guard hair kind of complete all the way around. Maybe we should talk about a coyote more, because there's a lot more guys trapping coyotes that are listening to this, and I'm getting into marten a little too much. Maybe.
Well, they're very similar. All those skins, the different fur out stuff like that, or the long hair, but it's basically the same process. And when we talk about heavy versus semi-heavy, that's what we call a weight or a section. So first off, we would look at the guard hair coverage. Okay, so that quality. So whether it's a select on a ones and twos, whatever the description might be, or good two. Okay, so those descriptions all reflect on guard hair coverage. Okay, so select being completely covered, down to, let's talk. We could talk about a good two, which is very weak. You can it's not the worst, but it's really sparse. You can tell that there's not a lot of guard hair there. You can see a lot of the underfur through the guard hair. It's not covered. So anyway, that's what that is. So So we would do that, and then depending on the species, like marten, and we would do that first, then we would section it or give it a weight, heavy, semi after. In the case of coyotes, we do it all at the same time. So we look for underfur and how thick it is and the coverage, and then put it into its pile all at once. Okay.
And so just so I'm clear on it, the underfur and the guard hair coverage, they will take on the same grade, or are they two different descriptions?
They're two different descriptions. So we could have select heavies, or we could have select semis. Okay. So again, select is referring to the guard hair coverage. Heavy or semi refers to the weight or the amount of underfur.
Okay.
Okay. So you see what I'm saying? You could have a really well covered coyote caught first part of the season, but it just doesn't have the underfur there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So the guard hairs are coming in. The guard hairs tend to come in earlier, or is it more of just varies depending on the area? Some coyotes have better guard hair than others.
Well, I mean, there's those factors too, right? The health of the animal, and how well it's eating, and what location it's coming from in North America, that kind of idea. But basically, they come in at the same time, but the guard hairs usually finish before the underfur does.
Oh, okay.
The other thing being different sections or weights, depending on where you are in the country, or whether you're coming from the States, like Pennsylvania, places like that, they have flat coyotes, right? Just like the foxes, they have short fur.
Yeah.
They're never going to be a heavy. So heavies generally come from the more northern parts of the States and into Canada. Okay. So section, I know it's really confusing. A section could be just where it's from.
Yeah. No, we're covering a lot of ground here. This is good. And I'm wondering where the section, where did the term section come from? Because I always think of it as section of the country or section of a region.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. But for us, a section could be the heavy section, and it could mean it's coming from, in coyotes, it's coming from Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and places like where you're, if you're in Maine or those places, New York, could have heavy coyotes. So that section is a reflection of how heavy it is, I guess.
So those might be like section 1, for instance?
Yeah, well, that's another. Section 1, section 2, section 3, you've probably seen those, third section.
Yes.
That's marketing. Again, that's the same term used for marketing and same term used in grading. So marketing section 1 would be all the clean skins that don't have any much damage.
Okay.
Section 3 is third section is the damage section. So again, it is really complicated, and it's hard to
so
explain it all.
It's not necessarily something that you can look at your fur and say, well, this is because I have a Maine beaver, which tend to grade pretty well. It could grade section 3 not because of the pelt thickness or the primeness. It could grade section 3 because it's damaged.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the way the sections are broke down in that sense. And then again, we have the sections determined by how heavy they are and how, that kind of idea, or how long the fur is. So if you want to talk about raccoons, I mean, we have lots of sections of raccoons, and that's just because depending on where they come from, if they're from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, those coons have, they're fairly long in terms of nap. We call the length of the fur a nap, just like on a paint roller,
Yeah.
Versus raccoons from Pennsylvania, Ohio, that have a shorter fur. Coat coons, which we get from southern states like Indiana and Missouri and those types of things, those really, really short. So that's a section in that sense too. So.
Yeah.
I know it's confusing. It's there's a lot to it. So, and that's what a lot of trappers, they don't understand. And that's part of that grading process that you said, why do we ship it there? And this is all what we do to make sure that they go with skins that are all alike.
Yeah, because it's hard to know what you have a lot of times.
Yeah, and not saying that just because you're from Maine, your skins are all going to go with Maine skins. We grade the fur, we always say we don't give it a zip code.
Right.
Okay? So if your fur belongs with stuff from Minnesota or Wisconsin, or it belongs in the section from northern Canada, that's where it's going to go. Okay, so we look at the fur and then determine where it goes.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting. We have a lot of people comment on that and say, I sent coons from such and such part of the country, and they actually graded with the Minnesota coons, for instance.
Right, and that's what it is. We've had guys catch coyotes, eastern coyotes, and they go in with the western coyotes, which are the higher price stuff. It all depends on what the fur looks like. So we've had people in the past say, oh, well, just because I'm from Maine, that's where my fur goes. Well, no, it doesn't. It goes where it belongs, and that's the benefit of having it graded. If we left it all in the Maine section, then you may not get as much for it, but we want to make sure you guys get as much possible for your fur. And if that's where it goes, that's where it goes. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because one of the auctions, I can't remember whether it was FHA or NAFA this last winter, there were a couple guys down the road from me that got it over $100 for some of their coyotes. And we're usually looking at a $25 to $40 coyote maybe.
Right.
So that must have been a case where they just graded, there was something with the color and quality there that they graded in with the western coyotes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't happen very often, but usually, every once in a while you get one that deserves it into those other sections, and, that's what we're here for. So,
I'm going to ask you off the top of your head maybe to give me throw out a few symbols, a few of these abbreviations, just to kind of, just a little exercise in understanding some examples of where fur might grade. So let's say there's a guy down in Tennessee and he ships coyotes, and caught say in November in Tennessee, and they're maybe not the best quality, but I actually had a guy that sent some coyotes to one of the auctions from Tennessee, and he only got like $15, and he was trying to figure out, what did I do wrong, and I've tried to go through the reason for that had nothing to do with his fur handling, but what might those coyotes show up in as a grade on his ticket?
So they would be, you could have size first, obviously. You could have 1-2, okay, or ones and twos we call them.
Mm-hmm.
But then the weight would be what we call flat, okay, especially from Tennessee, because they're short furred. They may have the under fur, but they're either flat or what we call light, so LT.
Okay,
and that's where they would end up. So nothing he's done. Obviously, that's the nature of the animal from the location.
So they'd have 1-2 flat or LT, and maybe a color after that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. What about one of those big coons from Minnesota that tends to do well?
So they could be a select ones, and they would be heavy, semi, and then a color. We don't really break them down a whole lot. We break them down more as a section. So so what happens then is, in our catalog with the list of all the different lots, we have different sections. Again, there's another one, a section in the catalog for all the skins that are that Minnesota, Wisconsin type.
Okay.
So it would be sold separately from, so you could have select heavy A-colored coon from Minnesota, and then you could have select heavy A-colored coon from Ontario. That's another section, say.
Okay, and they're sold separately.
Same grade, but different section, and they're sold at different times. So basically, it's different catalogs for every section that we have. So we have what we call a Min-Wis, so Minnesota, Wisconsin section. We have an Ontario section or Canadian section. We have an Eastern U.S. section, which would be Pennsylvania, Ohio, that type of stuff. You know what I mean? And then so all those sections each have all the grades that all the other sections are, but they're all from that particular area.
And now that doesn't mean that like you said, there are some furs that maybe were not caught there that can go into that?
Exactly, yeah. So as they go through and they do what they call sections, so they're looking at how long the guard hair is and how heavy it is, if they find a bunch or they find a skin that belongs better in a different section, they'll pull it out and then they'll transfer it over to that.
So it's just a simple way of showing like a representative pelt that comes typically from that area.
Yeah, typically those sections, and that's why we do like Minnesota, Wisconsin's different from Pennsylvania or New York or that kind of thing, right?
And I assume the buyers are looking for Minnesota coon for a specific use.
They know where they are. Yeah, exactly. Because they all have different qualities about them, you know. Canadian coon, Ontario coon are really woolly, so they have a lot of thick underfur, better for trim and that kind of thing. And then the eastern U.S. coon are shorter, but they have straighter guard hair, straighter underfur, and used more for coats, stuff like that.
Okay.
Again, they have that different use, and that's why we pull them and separate them.
Yeah. Now, I have one other question about the grading, and because this has come up a little bit recently from several trappers online. I've seen where guys are talking about the grades changing, and I know you talked about, you know, there's a line with the grades, and one grade goes here and one goes here, and you stick with that line. Are there cases where, depending on the market conditions, I know you mentioned you lot some grades together, but are there ever cases where the grade actually changes?
So that would be the line changing. So say between a heavy and a semi.
Right.
No. So we grade them the same. The problem is, and I know where you're coming from. The graders, sometimes I'll hear the trappers say, "Oh, the graders were tough on me this year."
Right. Exactly.
Right? I think that's what you're getting at.
Like they say, during a low market, maybe the grade gets tougher. In a high market, there's a little bit less of that pickiness.
Generally not. Sometimes when, obviously, they're not paying a whole lot for them, we try and give the benefit to the trapper. But as far as being harder on them, that's not usually the case. And what happens is you'll see, and we notice it when we're looking at the collection. I can go through my collection of coyotes and start grading. I'm going, geez, they don't look very nice this year. And I'm not just talking about individual skins, the collection as a whole. Uh-huh. So depending on the year, depending on who knows what, you know, the feed that's available, or you know, fur primes up with the amount of sunlight or lack of sunlight, not so much the temperature. But for whatever reason, some years the skins look better than others.
Yeah.
Can't explain it, but that's what happens, and that's why when the trapper says, "Oh, they were hard on my stuff," no, the stuff just wasn't the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we look at it the same year to year.
Not looking at enough skins, you wouldn't really know that.
No.
As a trapper.
And again, if you know, I hate to say it, but a lot of the trappers that are ignorant to good stuff versus bad stuff, or they don't have the experience that we do to say, well, these are good skins. Obviously, to most trappers, all their skins.
Everybody's fur is perfect.
Yeah.
Just ask them.
Yeah, exactly, right. And you know, I don't mean to be mean, but that's the issue, right? And they may think, you know, they had really good collection, and it may not turn out so well that way, but that's what happens. Sometimes we say, oh yeah, the collection was really nice this year. We had a lot of, you know, the skins look good, but other years not so good.
So more of where you will see the changes is when, say, you'll take a select and a heavy and put them together for marketing purposes.
Right.
But that's assuming that they're going to get the best price by doing that.
Yeah. So in that case too, like, I mean, the one guy, you know, take for example, say the trapper got a lot of selects and ones. Well, the next year we had lots of selects and lots of ones, so we split them apart, and the trapper ended up getting mostly ones. Yeah. Depending on where he's from. So he's like, geez, I don't get any selects this year. Well, maybe he never had any in the first place. He was just part of the grouped select and ones. You understand? This
is absolutely going to explain a lot of confusion.
Okay.
That makes perfect sense. Because we hear that all the time. Like, all my coyote, the same animals from the same area graded this one year, and then they graded this the next year.
Right. So there's a couple of combinations of things that could have happened, right? A, they just didn't have the fur this year for whatever reason. B, we split it, and depending on where you're from, they never were nice. And geographic location has a lot to do with the fur quality. I mean, some areas, say specifically here in Ontario, you go 4 hours south of here, they have really nice beavers in a certain section of Ontario over towards the Quebec border. But you go 4 hours southwest of here, down towards the Detroit, Windsor area, they have really terrible beavers. So nothing you can do about it. So
yeah, interesting. Speaking of beavers, I assume you're still going through the same grading process, but it seems like it's we're really getting killed on those high quality beavers that used to be at a premium to the Hatter beavers. And now it seems like we're almost getting the same price.
Yeah, well, we are because the price is so low. The Hatter people are buying the grades a little bit better grades above them because they're at the price range they can still afford. The problem with the select beavers, the good stuff, is the market's not there for them right now. They're really expensive to have dressed and processed. It's pretty much done here in North America where wages are expensive. A lot of these other dressing plants are overseas, China, Cambodia, places like that. France, they have lower labor rates and things like that, so they can do it cheaper. As far as dressing beavers and plucking and shearing them, it's a North America talent, and they haven't figured it out elsewhere in the world. If they could, then maybe they could do them a little cheaper, and so that reflects that they're not using beaver as much.
Okay.
So for those, and that's what we've been noticing, right? Is the Hatter market's really strong because it's basically a cut and dry process. They're grinding them up. They're not really doing much to them. Yeah. So.
Do you see that the Hatter market weakening at all coming up, or do you think are we oversaturating it maybe?
No. It's what it's going to happen is you're never going to see them go above the price that they're at for those damaged skins.
Yeah.
They basically buy them by the pound. Okay, so they know they can pay $8 or $9 a pound per beaver. So that's what they're basing their price on, because felt is dealt with in pounds. Not so much for quality, right? So
right.
But there's definitely still a huge Hatter market from what we've been talking to some of the buyers in the last month or so, and they're still looking for goods. And the quantities trapped, the production
is down. Low, yeah. So. Yeah. Well, that's good. We need something. Could you just quickly, what is a shearable beaver? You hear that, people hear that a lot, but maybe not everybody understands the term shearable.
Shearable. So in order to be shearable, it has to have a certain length. So there's different lengths of shear. So meaning when they're gone through the process, the under fur is a certain length, and it's in we do it in millimeters. I don't know what it'd be in inches, but so depending on, in order to be shearable, it has to be a certain length. Okay, so it has to be, say, 3/8 of an inch.
And that's the guard hair or the under fur?
The under fur.
Okay.
So sheared, the first step is they pluck out all the guard hair. And that's done manually, and that's another reason why it's so expensive.
Oh, that's got to be brutal.
You got it. So basically, they do it. They put the beaver on a beam, almost, and very similar to just fleshing it on the leather side, and they flesh or they scrape off all the guard hair on the fur side with a draw knife type thing.
Wow.
So that's the first step, and then they run the sheared beaver or the plucked beaver through a machine, almost like a wood planer, and it shears it down to whatever depth they want. But it has to be a minimum of 10 or 12 millimeters or whatever that is in order to be shearable. So
that way it'll be even and level once it's sheared off.
Exactly, yeah. And the other thing is, if it's too flat, then the machine can't actually cut the hair off.
Okay.
It has to have something there to cut off.
And those are going to be more made into coats?
Yes, coats and hats and things like that. So those are basically, though, your heavy and semi beavers. If you're looking at weights on your return, if it says heavy or semi, those are both shearable, just at different lengths. Heavy, so you can leave them longer. Semis are going to be a shorter. You can end up with shorter sheared.
Okay. Huh. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, Mark.
Yeah, there's a lot of info there, and it's a lot to absorb. And I'm hoping I'm getting your point across, or they're learning something about what goes on up here.
Absolutely. Well, now we're starting to make sense of a bunch of different terms and symbols and everything. So I think it's one of those things, just putting all the pieces together, and if you can pick up one or two things at a time, and eventually we'll be better informed when we get that sheet with all the descriptions of our furs.
Yeah, and it helps to understand the grades. So if there is something that you as a fur handler are doing improperly, you can say, hey, look, I ended up with a bunch of good slights or damaged skins, and then you can kind of remember, oh, geez, I know, try and improve on that. So you try and improve on your grades later. So
that's a great thing. I wanted to point one thing out, because I had some animals some marten that I sent in, and I had one that it graded as heavy damage, and it had no visible damage that I could tell when I sent it. And I was trying to figure out what the heck went on. Well, I was reading in one of the documents somewhere that they recommend that when you put that marten fur up, you when you turn it, you leave the front legs inside of the pelt. And I assume I was never doing that. I was taught to leave them out, and I assumed that that may have caught up in something in the drumming process. Is that common?
It's not common, but it does happen. So unfortunately, we can't alleviate that problem, and the damage or the repercussion of that goes back to the trapper, right? Like, it's still a damaged skin. We can't, even though unfortunately you send it in maybe as a good skin, it's still a damaged skin. We can't sell it as a good one. So if you just do those little tricks to avoid that, like leaving the legs tucked in, hopefully that doesn't happen again.
So are there some other tricks or tips, or maybe you could talk about some of the common things you see that you're like slapping your head like, I wish this guy would have done this differently. It would have been much more valuable fur.
Yeah, and actually there's just one really important, and that's size for us.
Okay.
If you look at when you're stretching the fur or putting it on the, if it's a beaver, if you're putting it on the lines or anything else, for me, as if I'm sizing skins, I get these borderline skins, we call them, that are right between one size or the other. And then it's a judgment call, or you go, geez, if he'd have stretched it a little bit bigger, he would have made that size. So having the lines with the different sizes that, our size categories, which is all you can find online or in our manuals that we distribute, take the time to mark the different size categories on your board. So from the nose, say we're doing a coyote stretcher, from the nose down to, say, 42 inches, and draw a line across there. And then the next one's at 46, and the next one, whatever it might be, depending on the species. Mm-hmm. That way, when you pin that animal on the board, you're not right on the borderline. Because if that animal shrinks to the smaller size, depending on what it is, you can be losing tens of dollars, on each skin.
Okay.
So make sure that when you're pinning the skirt or the base of the tail, that it's well past enough the line, that it's not going to shrink up into the next.
So for a coyote, maybe would that be maybe like half an inch, something like that?
Yeah, maybe even more.
Okay.
Because depending on the skin, but see, and for marten, it makes a big difference because a quarter inch could.
Yes.
They're not big animals, so a quarter inch makes a big difference on the skin. If it shrinks a quarter inch and you're down from an extra large or a large into a medium, you're going to lose a lot of money. So paying attention to that is pretty important. Same with beavers. Beavers is probably by far the worst. We get skins that are, say you had a size category for large, 55 to 60 inches, right?
Yep.
That's the
length plus the width.
Beaver, right. So you get a beaver that measures 59.5 inches when we size it. Okay. I don't know if that's going to make the bells and whistles or lights come on, but if that beaver might have been an extra large at a 61 inch when you started, but it shrunk down to 59.5. It's now a large, but it's also now a large beaver that's been overstretched.
Oh, geez.
Okay. So this is where I'm coming at with sizing and making sure it's nailed properly. So you've now stretched that beaver. Maybe it wouldn't have been an extra large ever, but you've stretched it to 59.5 inches. If you'd have brought it down and left it loose, you could have stretched it so when it dried, it was at 56 or 57 inches.
Yeah.
You would have made that fur that much more dense. And that's so with everything, if you don't over pull it, and that's just the trap. You have to learn that as a fur handler as to how much to pull and how much not to back it off. And that comes way back to what we were talking earlier about potentially a large, heavy skin being worth more than an extra large, light skin. You know, so in the case of beaver, definitely a heavy skin's worth more than a semi skin of a size higher.
So avoid overstretching.
Yeah.
But if you're close, if you're right on the line, then you can stretch it a little more.
You can, but as long as it's going to make that size that you pinned it in when it's dry, because you know every skin's going to stretch or shrink when it dries. So if you really have to pull it to get past the line, it's probably going to shrink back up to the smaller size category, and then you end up overstretching it.
Yeah, don't push it then.
A little bit. Yeah.
Another thing.
That's the biggest thing. Go ahead.
With beaver, I think I was watching Andy from FHA did a beaver video, and one of the things he mentioned was he does something around the nose where he cuts that section off. Is there any difference there as far as from a grader's perspective, whether that's on or off?
Well, the nose doesn't count as part of your size. So if you leave the nose on, we're going to subtract. Basically, we measure from an inch past the eyes. So if you leave the nose on, we're going to take off maybe an inch.
Okay, but if we cut it off, then we get credit for that length.
Yeah, so it's exactly where it is. So some people think, well, if I cut the nose off, it's not going to make that size. That's that's not an issue. I've stretched thousands of beavers, and if you cut the nose off, you'll still get that same size. There's enough room to play that you can get it up there without leaving that nose on. So cut it off, because otherwise what happens if you leave the nose on and we take an inch off, you might have had a 55.5-inch beaver. We take an inch off, you're now down to a 54.5, and you've lost the whole size.
Lost the whole size,
okay?
Yep.
So size is pretty important, and especially when it means the difference between one size and the next could be, depending on the species, again, $10 or $15. You use that a bunch of times, you're losing money. So, geez,
that was a good one. I didn't expect you to bring that one up. I thought you'd say something about some other thing people are doing, but that's really good. And one other question on the size: when you measure a pelt other than beaver, let's say a marten or a coyote, where are you taking that length from the nose to right near the tail, or are you going by the outer leg?
It's we call it the base of the tail, but it's actually it is actually the shortest point. So, and it could be at the edge of the board, where the leg is.
Yep.
It could be there. So we actually use the shortest. So that's the other issue we've talked about, is making sure that when you pin that animal, it's straight across.
Okay.
And there's no scalloped effect, because we have to take it from the shortest point.
Okay.
So make sure it's straight across from the edge of the board to the tail, and from the tail to the opposite edge of the board, and straight across. And then there's no room for guess, and you're not losing any size. Because what happens, guys will put a pin on the outside of the tail, on the edge of the board, one by the tail, and then when it shrinks, it kind of gets that scallop effect.
Yeah.
Shrink. And if you'd have pinned it all the way straight across, it's not going to shrink. So you could lose again there. You could lose half an inch, 3/4 on a coyote. To make sure it's straight across.
Yeah, and I've been guilty of getting lazy with pins. It gets tiring after a while. You feel like all you're doing is putting pins in, but it sounds like it's definitely worth doing.
Well, like I said, when you can lose $10 of skin from one side to the next, or even more, depending on what it is.
Yeah,
it's well worth taking the time to slam a few more pins in.
Absolutely.
But other than that, trapper error, it's just most of the time it's making sure they're fleshed properly and stuff like that. But generally, it's not too bad.
Awesome. Well, geez, Mark, I really appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of great information we packed into a short period of time.
I enjoyed it. It's one of the things I'm here for, and like I said, I like doing it and making sure you guys know what's going on and help you guys out as much as we can so you get the most for your furs. So is there a good place for people to contact you for more information if they have any questions or anything? Or want to learn more about this stuff? Yeah, they can contact me here just at the Fur Harvester number. It's listed on the internet or on the publications. I can give it to you now. It's 705-495-4688. Or they can email me at mtaylor, so it's MTAYLOR @furharvesters.com. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And if I don't know the answer myself, I'll put it over to somebody who does.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. Thanks again, Mark. Really
No
appreciate
problem.
it. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Certainly, anytime.